Or good afternoon. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're at today. We'll do introductions in just a moment, but I did just want to, again, welcome folks. I wanted to let you all know, and you should see it on your screen as well, that ACE webinars are recorded. So please be aware of that. A couple housekeeping items. We welcome you to put questions in the chat as we go if we have a thought that occurs to you, but we have planned our time this morning to allow ample time for questions and discussions towards the second half of our hour together. So we'll go through some information and then we'll take any questions from the chat. And then we have a few discussion prompts for the group as well. I wanted to start by just doing quick introductions. My name is Jennifer Alexander. I lead communications and marketing for Oregon State University's Division of Extension and Engagement. And I have been an ACE member for all of my career, which is somewhere between 15 and 20 years now. I think 2006 is when I joined, and have had the honor of being on the ACE board a couple of times during there. So it really is wonderful to be able to share some information with you, because ACE webinars that I remember used to be just conference calls have been a pretty core part of my ACE experience. So it's always a pleasure to get to share with colleagues like this. I'll also welcome my co-presenter, Dr. Kelsey Hall.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kelsey Hall. I'm an associate professor of agricultural communications at Utah State University. I help run our agricultural communication program and mentor graduate students earning their master's degrees in agricultural and extension education and family consumer science extension education. I currently serve as the research director on the ACE board, and I also have been a longtime ACE member, joining in 2006, 2007, and that's when I attended my first ACE conference in 2007. And so I'm excited to work with Jennifer on this project and be able to share some of the results that I hope can be taken back for conversation.
Thanks, Kelsey. We also wanted to share a couple quick thank yous. So in 2019, and again with our recent 2025 survey, we could not have done what was really kind of a passion project for the two of us without support from ACE and from our colleagues at APLU, the Association for Public and Land Grant Universities, and specifically the Board on Ag Assembly Communication Team and office within APLU. So both ACE, through the Leadership and Management Learning Community and Board, and APLU helped support this survey by helping extend the survey to the right people. So it really is through ACE networks and through APLU listservs that this survey was able to reach the right folks we wanted to respond. And then, of course, both organizations also helped share the information about today's webinar. And I'm seeing a really great mix of leaders from across the land grant system and from within ACE on the call with us today. So thank you for making time to join. Briefly, we wanted to share why this project and why now. So it really came, as you've heard, Kelsey has a research and academic background, and I am a practitioner through and through. And as Kelsey and I chatted at the ACE conference one year, we realized that similar questions kept getting asked around in circles, around on our email listserv, in the hallways at ACE, variations of how are you doing this? How is your unit handling this? What are you working on? What are you thinking about? What are you hiring? We're thinking of hiring this position. Does anyone have something like it? And we were also seeing within other places in universities that it had been more of a common practice to do a benchmarking survey in other academic programs or other disciplines. And so we thought, well, heck, why can't we do that for ACE, for us? Can we capture that so that we have a snapshot of how our units are currently operating, what the trends are, and then be able to use that for our planning purposes, primarily as leaders of units who are doing common marketing for research, extension, and academic programs. And so we did that survey. We shared it with ACE. A few years passed. We had a conversation, another ACE conference, and we said, you know what would make this even more useful if we did it again? And we could see trends and we could see changes. So that's what we did, and that's what brings us here today. We also shared these slides in advance with folks, so we are hoping folks had a time to glance at those. They were in the announcements you received about this. And so we are not going to present every result in full. The slides have those. And we can go during the discussion to any that you have a particular interest in talking about or sharing if we don't cover it in depth here. But we are going to hit on a few things that we thought were useful or worth noting for the whole group as we go through our presentation. So just briefly, what was this survey about? It asked about structure of communication and marketing units, some things about staffing, skill sets, funding. What does your unit exist to do? And then importantly for forward looking, what are the opportunities and challenges that you are seeing? And we also asked a few questions about unit leaders themselves. We asked folks to fill out this survey if they were the person responsible for leading communication and marketing functions for extension, for agricultural research, or for related academic programs at their university. So depending on how each university is organized, sometimes that is one office and one leader. Sometimes those are different functions or almost any combination of those. So in the end, we reached out or contacted 112 land grant universities. You can see the number of respondents that we had on the screen. Not surprisingly, most of those respondents were from our 1862 land grant universities, and we also had responses from our 1890 land grant colleagues. We did not have any responses from our 1994 land grant institutions and tribal colleges and universities. We did include outreach to them, but we know that is an area that we still are working to include more completely in ACE and within land grant communications generally. So just be aware of that as you see the responses. We also had responses from across every region. So we'd like to start just by sharing a little bit of highlights about unit leaders themselves. And so these are folks like me and my peers across the system. And for many years, we have talked and worked and had the support of leaders across the land grant system to really recognize the importance of having communication and marketing at the leadership table. And so we wanted to check in on that. This was a new question in 2025, and we asked if you are sitting on your organization's leadership team, whatever that is in your context, and most of us are. We also asked how often are you advising your leadership on communication and marketing? So you may be in a position at a table, but sometimes maybe getting asked for input, maybe not. And again, most of the time to always, folks in these roles are giving advice to leadership. It's also important to think about how we are spending our time as unit leaders, and we are spending our time distributed fairly evenly across a variety of things. We are all still doing tactical work. We are managing our units. We are thinking and working in terms of strategy and in terms of organizational leadership, and we're managing people. And all of those things take time. And in general, we are spread pretty evenly across all those functions. And most of us reported having a fairly high degree of flexibility that we can operate with. When we think about our units, we ask some similar questions. What are your priorities? Are we strategic units? Are we service units? And we are both. We are pretty solidly both, as you can see. We also are reporting that our units are contributing to helping our land grant institutions meet their mission and doing very well to extremely well at that. When we are asking where our units would like to focus more effort, you can see pretty clearly that those responses are showing up in wanting to be more strategic, both in communications and
Yeah.
in marketing. So keep that in mind as uh, you think about that other chart that said, okay, unit leaders, where are you spending your time? You're managing people and units and tactical and strategic 20 some percent of the time. But what you really want your units to be doing is more in the strategic realm. Also, when thinking about being strategic, it's important to think about when that happens. And so we asked about how proactive and how reactive is your unit's work. And there is a big movable middle here. Neutral is the winner on both of those. So that is probably good if you think about it in terms of the ability to be flexible. It is maybe not great if that defaults to reactive. So that's something to think
Yeah.
about as we go along. And then to dive a little deeper into what does that day-to-day work look like and who is on the teams doing this work, Kelsey will share a few highlights.
Right. Jennifer, would you advance the slides for me? Thank you. So we are, a lot of us are considered a service unit where we provide services, helping our experiment station, our extension services, and our colleges. So it's really not surprising to see us do a lot of news and media relations work, helping to get out our story and our messages about the impacts that we have. We did do a few new services from our 2019 survey. We did ask specifically about social media, and then we broke out our marketing. We wanted to be able to know who is focusing on like the tactics and the service side of things versus the strategy and the planning of the marketing campaigns and the work that needs to be done. We're also doing a lot of creative graphic design, multimedia work, which is really not surprising. But with the importance of web communication, we did divide that question out this time, or this item out, and we asked about web design versus web development. And so 35 of our units in 2025 reported doing web design work, whereas fewer units on the second of the next slide showed that they do web programming. I'm not very surprised by that web development, just because when you think about app development, programming, maybe less of like the course management system, creating pages and publishing content, that'd be a little bit different than that web development work. We still do some e-commerce and database management, but fewer responses there. And there are fewer as we go down into like the online learning and instructional design or information technology, which really doesn't surprise me because some information technology units have been more absorbed into universities and more unified across campuses, but also with online systems offering course degrees online. That maybe not surprise me too much, but I know a lot of extension programs are doing online coursework too, and we may be involved in some of that instructional design and the publishing of those courses. Next slide. We did want to ask in 2019 and in 25 if our employees have one primary responsibility. And what we're seeing is that no, they don't. This really does not surprise me, as there are a lot of individuals hired that may have a role in multimedia, but they may also do photography or web or graphics design work just based on their skill sets and training. I also can speak from like an agricultural communications program. I want my students to have multiple toolboxes or tools within their toolbox when they graduate. And so they may be able to do web design, graphic design, multimedia, photography, and be useful across different projects and maybe how you allocate what work your employees do. So that does not really surprise me that maybe employees don't have a primary role, although we will see jobs that will hire for multimedia or for graphic design or website design or social media. Okay. we want to think about time management, the use of time with employees and what that looks like. And so in 2025, we added a question about how much of your unit's time is spent during a week. And it's really not surprising to see the majority of responses having traditional hours between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And there's fewer individuals. The majority of them spend less than 20% of their time or effort after traditional hours working during evenings or weekends. That doesn't really surprise me when I think about communication units, maybe like 8 to 5 or 8:30 to 5:30. We'll be working here on campus locations, but sometimes we do have to cover evenings or weekends when I think about programming efforts, university or college related activities, and we get requests to have a photographer or videographer or somebody present at some location in those after traditional hours. Professional development is something that I think a lot of employees have desired. And we talk about how are we offering professional development to employees. We wanted to ask a question to our communication units on what skill sets are they developing for their current teams. And the top three in order were videography and photography, leveraging AI tools, and storytelling. And this really was not surprising to me in the results because the importance of videography and photography in our web and social media communication, but also our photography for print media. We have more AI tools that we can be used for time management or efficiency, or even in communicating about the impacts of our university. So leveraging those AI tools, and then the importance, of course, of still storytelling and being able to communicate our message across our platforms still is really valuable. So this led us to asking about positions that they're looking to hire for within the last 3 to 5 years. This data is from 2025, but we did ask this question in both 2019 and in 2025. And we saw similar um, results. And looking at that data, it was still wanting multimedia, digital media skill sets ranging anywhere from videography to photography. Motion graphics was something mentioned in 2025. We still want to hire individuals that are good writers and can communicate about science, but also be an editor. With web, that was something we also saw in 2019 and presently now for simplicity that incorporated the design, the search engine optimization, and app development or web development. And then, of course, we still have a need for graphic design and social media marketing. As we think about priorities, we can't do everything. And sometimes we don't do things as well because of our time or services or what resources we have available. So we did ask about what work is outsourced. And this data from 2025 showed that we're doing printing and binding and mailing outsourced. Really, that's not a surprise to me. I think a lot of extension or college communication units can work with their university printing services and have those options outsourced to them or to other print companies in their location. Sometimes graphic design and multimedia or digital design is outsourced. That could be because of staffing shortages, but also just the lack of projects that have asked for that work in the past. And so they would outsource it. And the same with web based on qualitative comments that we analyzed from the unit directors. I think this is a really good result and showing that there is extremely low or moderately low turnover in your communication unit. That could, we didn't ask why, but I think we can think about maybe the culture, the type of opportunities that the employees have for being able to do the role. It could be a little bit about the time management and things like that, and why they choose to stay there. But I think it's important for us to know that for the majority of our respondents, 47 of them, there's low or moderately low turnover. We also wanted to dive into the opportunities and challenges for our communication units and just highlight a few things that we could take away from those items. The first thing is when it comes down to groups, I think it's really important to know that the regional communication units, so like the Regional Land Grant Communicators Network, the NIFA Communicators Town Halls, and the National Land Grant Impact Database, are new opportunities for participation with our communication unit leaders since 2019. And so we see some strong participation in those items. And then 32 respondents did indicate participation in the Association for Communication Excellence. At a glance, we wanted to understand who's participating in the top 4 organizations. These results are very similar to the respondents overall and to the relative size of the regions. So I really don't think it's surprising to know that in the Western region, we have good participation, because I think about the number of states that are in the Western region compared to maybe the number of communication units located in the Northwest. And I don't really see any gaps in participation in these organizations. In terms of our strengths, we ranked, communication unit leaders ranked their staff skill sets, followed by their managing workload and competing priorities, and then the workplace culture. We took the top 3 rankings, and then we wanted to show that overall, the communication unit directors really thought like the staff skill sets, the managing of their workloads and competing priorities, and their workplace culture were their top strengths. But this was not surprising to also see that in the next slide that the managing workloads and competing priorities was also a top challenge. And I think this comes back to maybe are we being proactive or reactive sometimes, and how we can communicate and what we're being asked to do in our roles. And sometimes having to manage that workload throughout the year, and having some competing priorities based on requests that could come in from administrators, academic units, extension programs, and having to balance all of that out.
Thanks, Kelsey. So there were a section of slides in here about budgets and about org chart and where we're organized. We are not going to present those slides live, so I'm going to skip to the discussion prompt slide. But again, if our discussion takes us there, we're happy to pull those up and show them. Our thinking behind that was that that is good information for us to have, but those are the things that as leaders in extension services, colleges, communication units, we may have a little less direct influence over. And where we do have influence on our day-to-day work is those things about how we spend our time, who we're hiring, what services we're offering, how proactive are we, how strategic. And so we chose to try to aim this discussion to focus a little more on those things. So I'm gonna, again, we can go back to them if needed, but I'm gonna skip us over to some discussion prompts that we can start off considering together. As well, we're happy to take any questions that folks have, and we can ask and answer those together. So we're curious to know, what did folks notice, either as you read the slides on your own or this morning? What would you like to discuss in more depth with those who are here today? What information in here is applicable, is actionable for you either in the short or long term. And then because we've have a group of leaders together, what are things we might consider collectively? And so this last bullet is really the one that we hope has some staying power beyond this morning. So are there areas where, as we work collectively in ACE across the land grant system, are there things we're all working towards that we might consider doing together, or that ACE could be a resource and a support for? So we don't have to take these in order. We can start anywhere that anyone is interested in starting, with a question or with a response to one of these discussion prompts. Who would like to start us off? You can raise hand or you can put a question in the chat.
Melissa.
Yeah, Melissa, go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you for this. This is really interesting. I guess one of my first impressions was that there was a decrease in how many of the kind of communications and marketing teams involved or encompassed CRM aspects and instructional design aspects. And I was just kind of curious if we still do, like they are part of my team here in Maine for extension. So I just was, and sometimes it feels like, even though 30,000-foot view, I think those things are strongly connected. A lot of the CRM process is about communicating with our customers. But just curious if anyone had any thoughts about why we're kind of migrating away from that.
Or it's just the fact that out of 50 respondents, only 12 indicated that customer relations management, CRM, was a service that they're providing. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I thought that there was maybe not, was it compared to 2019? Maybe it wasn't compared, or maybe I
We
just
didn't have any data for 2019 on customer relations management. There wasn't any respondents, or I'm sorry, it was yeah, we only have 2025 data on that available, but
Thanks for that observation, Melissa. I want to give a moment if there's anyone else on the call who like Melissa does have a unit that is involved directly in either of those, that you are more in the online learning instructional design space. I am remembering that the corresponding learning community within ACE also may even be renamed at this point. Like there was, Melissa, for a while, a pretty robust and active distance ed instructional design group within ACE, and that is also similarly quieted. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. So yeah, any folks want to weigh in about that? I think that could also be a good thing to carry into the summer's ACE conference. It's probably not totally gone, but maybe smaller. So maybe there is room for, a smaller community of practice for the folks who do still have that responsibility to talk shop. Because we certainly don't want to not support it if it is a thing a segment of members are doing. Let's take Elizabeth's question very quickly, Kelsey, and then we can jump back to Stephanie's question.
Can we go to Stephanie's first? I want to look up.
Oh, sure. Do you need time to look it up?
I want to look up that data so I can be accurate, please.
Of course. Okay. So Kelsey will check on number of respondents in 2019. So Stephanie is asking us, what would being more strategic look like? Or examples of what you are currently doing that you see as being strategic.
So for me, when I think about being strategic, it's really about planning and connecting what we're doing proactively with the goals of the organization overall, which also encompass some of the goals of the university overall. So kind of making sure that what we're doing is aligning with that larger effort. That's one way that we try to be strategic.
I'll chime in. This is Toby from the LSU Ag Center. I think it's also about using data to drive some of our decisions and showing what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I know at my institution, we're not always good about, and going back to some of that reactionary, sometimes we're a little more reactionary. We're not planning as well as we should, and that's what keeps us from being truly strategic in the work that we do.
Thanks for those. Donna, do you want to say anything more about your comment in chat? And if you are in a place where you can talk, I'm very curious what that move to your unit being merged with the university level, what the impact was on that in terms of being strategic, more or less so,
We're
or
still
what
trying
you're
to
working on.
that out. So we merged in, I don't even know, 2023, 2022. It wasn't a very hasn't been a smooth process, so we're still trying to work out the kinks. So I was curious who else might sit in that level. Have they been were they merged, or was it always that way? In our experience, a lot of the decision making's been taken away from the college. And we haven't been able to like refill positions. So we're half the size of what we were, and we were always small. So curious about other people's structures, and if they are at the university level, do you have a dedicated like subset of folks who do serve the land grant side of the house?
Thanks. Donna, in your model, is that the case? Within Central, are you still dedicated to the land grant side?
We still are dedicated to the land grant side. So we're still embedded in the college. We don't directly report to them.
Anyone else want to comment on your relationship with the university's central team or unit?
I can share really quick. We unmerged, if you want to use that as a word, like 20 years ago, long before I was here. We had been embedded in our university's comms, but that leads another question in my brain here. I sit on our university's communication leadership team, and I'm curious if others, in addition to serving on perhaps their extension leadership or college leadership team, I'm curious if others here also sit on their university comms leadership team.
We here at LSU, we do meet regularly, monthly with the LSU system communication leaders. So we have LSU in Shreveport, Alexandria, and different area, like, other campuses of the LSU system. So we do meet regularly with that group of leaders to discuss what we're working on. We have recently undergone a change. We have a new president, and so they pulled our campus of the Ag Center as a research institution under LSU. So they have shifted how we operate a little bit and who we report to. I don't have a clear vision of what that's going to look like moving forward and how that might affect us as our communications team. So far, they've pretty much left us alone, but there is always that concern that they might do like what Donna was talking about, what happened at Clemson. So so far we've been, like I said, kind of left to our own devices. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Here at Iowa State, each college operates within their own communications unit, and then we also have a university level communications and marketing team. Recently, following this, they had like an outside company come in and evaluate our communications and marketing efforts here at the university. And because as a result of that, they've created these dotted lines, is what they're calling them. So like our communications and marketing director has a dotted line to University Marcom, but we still operate within our own college level Marcom team, if that makes sense. And we're still waiting to kind of see how that's going to look moving forward. It's a little unclear right now, but it's trying to get everyone on the same page to be a little more strategic university-wide with Marcom.
Thanks, Whitney, and thanks, Chris, for your chat comment. So Chris, who's at University of Florida, IFAS says meet with the central team, but there's not a formal supervision. That's our model here at Oregon State as well. We've actually been trying to advocate for more meetings and a little bit more formality with Central because we think that would help be more strategic. We don't get a lot of lead time or heads up on campaigns that we might plug into, new platforms that are being considered that might consolidate. It's ad hoc. There are some. An example is there is consideration for a central digital asset management platform that is a formal conversation with all of us participating. Other things, not as much.
I see a good comment from Melissa about Maine, thinking on both sides there's an increased effort to stay connected and to collaborate. At Utah State University, we did something interesting. We had to merge like 7 colleges into 3 colleges for budgetary issues. And so we are now the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So we took 2 communication units from 2 colleges and merged them into 1. But what happened was that there were some changes in staffing. And then they took extension, which was always under our college, and they actually separated it and moved all the extension and extension communications into our statewide campuses. Because the idea is that an extension is in 28 of our counties of 29. And it's been interesting because before our college and extension experiment station communications was all one unit, and they had staffing that were kind of assigned to either the college or extension and college, and they could like cross help each other. And now we're seeing more separation.
I'd like to take us back to a comment that Toby made a little while ago and kind of back to the a driving reason why Kelsey and I wanted to do this project is because the conversation we just had is one we have a lot, right? Like, what's happening to you? What's changing? Are you like this? Are you like we are? Oh, you're different. How does that work? And so what we have now is we've got 2 surveys worth of some data that shows how other units are operating. And of course, there's a mix. All of our universities are different. But thinking about, maybe that 3rd bullet point or the 4th one, now that we've got some data to also show, hey, here's how this is working across the system. Wherever you're at, whether you're in we collaborate or we're merging or we unmerged, what information from this research, if any, is applicable to that you use as you are having those conversations? as you're sitting in those meetings with Central, or as you're talking with your dean or director about what that shift means or might mean for you. Is there anything in here that you see being able to go home and put to use in that context of how you're being strategic or not, how you're working?
Or two.
This is Chris at UF. I didn't get a chance to join in earlier, but I did look at the slides earlier, and I thought it was very interesting how high the percentage was of teams that want to be more strategic and want to do less transactional work, seeing the overall, larger impact it can have. It'll be interesting to see if that helps move the needle in discussing what things we stop doing, and using this as sort of some additional data points of about what's needed and maybe what's not so important.
Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, I would share, not doing or doing differently, right? Maybe there's still some service happening, but if that's in a broader context of, but only if it's part of the plan, or it has to wait longer if it's not, one of these strategic priorities. Anybody else want to share about what information is a takeaway for you or useful to you? Take a moment to read John's comment. All right, so the university hosted a brand camp for the comms teams from across the university. And you're answering from an experiment station perspective. Thanks, John. One thing that this has me thinking about in my role as a unit leader, thinking about what things folks are outsourcing. There's some commonality there, and that's another thing that's kind of been traded around in emails and listservs is when someone has decided to outsource a service. Is there a space for us to be sharing resources, sharing lists of who does good work? Does anyone think that is something that maybe ACE could be helpful in maintaining, or do you have that like within your university? So again, our model here at Oregon State, each college is right now generally outsourcing their own. Like we're all finding our own photographers. There's not a central like university approved photographer database to tap into. When we've been looking for a freelancer for editing, my go-to has been like, let's ask around ACE. Like, so is there any value or utility to folks think in centralizing lists of resources? Perhaps
I think that would be
ACE.
Yeah, I think that would be a fantastic idea. We have found ourselves outsourcing more graphic design work lately because the workload is so tremendous. And we're using a lot of people locally, but we actually could use a few more designers just to have on a list. And, they don't have to be local to do that type of work, not like a photographer would have to be. So I think that would be very helpful if we could go and look and see who's out there and who might be available to do these types of projects when we have too much to give to our local designers.
Jennifer, we have some great comments right now about the number of universities that have to have their freelancers be approved vendors in their procurement system. So if I see that Montana, was it the University of Arkansas, was it Clemson, maybe some of these schools I'm saying. So like that process is really interesting. UConn,
Mhm.
Maine.
Yeah, pretty standard.
Mhm.
Yeah, same
Yeah.
same for most of us, I would bet. Yeah. Yeah, and individual freelancers, I think it seems like that's working fairly the same for all of us. We are I mentioned at our university the example of like considering a particular platform that everyone could tap into. Um, we are we have a contract right now in our unit with an audience research vendor, and that was a pretty big lift for us. It was something we prioritized as part of our budget and as part of being strategic. That is something that going forward, I think, could be done in a way that could be shared across. I can only imagine the hoops that would jump through to be in like two different universities, like procurement systems, but or again, possibly through ACE. So I'm curious if there's thoughts on not like a service or a platform, like a research vendor, like a web design consultant, like something that's more than just an individual person doing graphic design or editing. Anyone have experience contracting with those services? And do you think that's something that is feasible or useful to tap into more broadly? Or do we leave that one in the camp of just, hey, we used these people and we would recommend them to our colleagues? Maybe not a huge need right now. I don't at all mean to put anyone on the spot, and I understand some folks may not be in a place where you can unmute or offer a comment. But in addition to communication unit leaders on the call, I am recognizing a few names this morning who have a little different role. I'm seeing some other types of leaders within the land grant system on here, or some folks who do this work but sit outside of a university but are still part of our land grant team. And I just wanted to offer a moment to check in with them and see if they have any perspective that they'd like to share about this. Although it was really common marketing, information, what are they seeing from their perspective as a different sort of leader in the land grant system?
Jennifer, this is Brett Hess. I'll comment just real quickly because I noticed that some of the opportunities are beyond the university, participation in regional comm groups, and at the national level, CMC, National Impact Database. So I'm curious, was there any information in the survey that gleans out in terms of being more strategic, how your institution might align with some of the regional and national efforts?
Yeah, thanks for that. And Brett, do you want to just really briefly share your role for folks who might not know you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm the executive director for Ag Innovation West. We support the experiment station directors in the West and also have national responsibility. And we also support the Western Region academic program directors.
Thanks for that. Right. Anyone want to offer a thought or an insight on that? And as Kelsey said, some of those groups are new or had new emphasis since 2019, and all of those things from NIFA town halls to regional networks to the impact database are higher level bodies working on strategic things, and we are seeing participation in those. So what has that meant for folks from a university level perspective to be involved in those? And is that playing out locally for you as being able to say we are being strategic or more strategic? Any insights on that? Are those things that you are talking with your leadership about locally?
We talk a lot about strategic things here at UF and what we want to do and don't want to do, but it's an ongoing education about what that means, right? Because people want what they either have always had that they got from our team, and even things that we stopped doing several years ago sometimes are just like, what, well, I've always gotten this from you. Well, no, for the past 3 years you haven't, here's why, and here's where you can get that. But it's an ongoing conversation. So it's a little bit, it would be faster on our side, but we've got a lot of folks out there who rely on us for things that may not be as important as they think.
Hi, everybody. This is Andrea from APLU, and I would also just like to point out one thing that's really quite different from where I sit is that APLU has a communications and marketing committee membership. I see several of my CMC colleagues on the line, and there was a change. I think it's been about 2.5 or 3 years now, where we added regional communicators, and Jennifer serves as well as others. So that's one way to facilitate the communication between all of the campuses across the country, the regions, and then also feed into our understanding at the national level.
Thanks, Andrea and Brett. This also has me thinking about what we're going to ask in another 5 or 6 years. And now I'm curious to know, as communication and marketing unit leaders, how much of our time, like we talked about, how much of your time you use strategic, tactical, managing people. I'm curious how much of our time we are spending focused, like at state, regional, national levels, for example. One way in my day-to-day that I have tried to set up myself and our team to be positioned as being a strategic partner is paying attention to those things, right? It's like going to the town hall and paying attention to the toolkits and reading the newsletters about USDA and APLU priorities. No one's necessarily asked us to do that as a unit, but because we watch that and pay attention, we have found that we often have content ready then when someone needs it. Whether that's Hill visits or our federal government relations director needs something. And then as I think back to years ago in the past, if we were only paying attention to what was being asked of us, our content maybe would not necessarily be in that good of a shape to be sharing at those other levels. So I've found it good practice to put in some time to just pay attention, at least. I also agree with Chris. It is an ongoing education. So I often am reminding my leadership that our team is actually the ones inputting to NIDB and that it's working great and they need to, like, we're on it. But have to educate about how that works and why we're doing it the way we are. Anyone else want to share? Either on this topic or if you want to take this in a new direction? You could also, this would also in our last 5 minutes be a great time to share some wish lists or requests for either like would love to keep talking about this. What if we did this as ACE? This is something I'd like to see. So any kind of closing reflections, wish lists for the future that ACE could help with? Attend ACE conference. Thank you, John.
I also think some of this content could maybe be pulled out and examined, at a closer level at an ACE conference, and maybe it'd be a jumping off point for a session or, a panel discussion or a session.
We actually shared the preliminary findings of this study in the 2025 ACE conference. And so my future is publishing a research brief that will share this data with Jennifer and get it into the JAC, which is our Journal of Applied Communications, if that helps kind of continue that conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. I think all of us could spend easily another hour on any one of the things that got raised today. This also has me remembering and appreciating how ACE has made opportunities available that are helping us all or members of our team build some of these more strategic and leadership skills, whether it was through the current Leadership Institute that's relaunching this year, or the evaluation and reporting certificate last year, or the crisis issue one the way before that. So again, like I think there's value in discussing and sharing. And also, if there is something that we all want to build capacity or skills around, I think we could offer that up for ACE as like, is this the next certificate? If there's something in there. Thanks, Toby, for that. If anybody has suggestions on which specific things you really would like to dig into more, please feel free to share those with us. Again, like Toby said, they could be future sessions, future webinars, panels, informal discussion groups. So yeah, if you've got specifics, please send those our way and I'd be happy to facilitate more around those.
And this has actually been really curious for me and some future research ideas I have and how I want to dig a little bit deeper, maybe qualitatively with this work, rather than just a survey every 5 years, that I'd love to think about. John brought up a great idea about maybe some examples, any over the past year or two in emergency communications or crisis communications. And while he hasn't had to deal with that yet, being maybe interested in stories or maybe how other institutions are handling crises and proactively or reactively, right? Like some of it could be risk communication and being prepared to respond.
Thanks for that, John. We'll make sure to share that with the leadership of ACE's leadership and management learning community so they can consider that for a future coffee chat. It'd be a great forum. All right, well, we are coming up on just a couple minutes until the hour. I want to give folks a chance to take a stretch or get a drink of water before you probably have to hop to your next meeting. So I'll just close by saying thank you again for making time to join us or watch this later if you're watching the recording. And thank you again to ACE and APLU for your support in extending this survey and for anyone who took time to respond to it or pass it to the right person at your university to respond. Happy to take all the suggestions and figure out how to have those follow-up conversations. Also, you noted on the entry slide, a number of folks in different organizations and universities have stepped up to sponsor ACE this year, and their support is what lets us help having these opportunities, especially the upcoming ACE conference, so that we can continue to talk about these things together. So thanks for making time. Thank you for responding. And I look forward to seeing hopefully a good number of you at the ACE conference in a few weeks. Hope you have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you, Kelsey, and everyone. Take care. Kelsey, I saved our the chat for us
did
just to be sure
too.
that someone got it. Good. We have a backup.
I did too, and I wrote a bunch of notes for ideas for discussion and the part of the
Great.
research brief, so we can debrief later.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to take this opportunity while we're on to do a little bit of housekeeping, and Ace can cut out this part of the recording. And I think I can
I
stop
think we
it.
have